And in the end, what I was able to do is lose 270 pounds of fat, but I also put on, well north of 40 pounds of muscle in that process over those 5 years. So it was a transformation. So it was a net loss of, just over 200 pounds. But the way that my body carries that 200 pounds, that 200 pound plus weight loss is very, very different than someone who went on Ozempic or had gastric bypass, because I didn't have either of those. And it transformed everything, just the way my body moves in space, everything, and the way it looks, the way I didn't want to look like Jared from Subway. Those before and afters where Jared, ate all these Subway sandwiches and he just looked like a smaller version of a fat guy at the end, and with no real muscle definition. And my goal was to actually end up coming out looking like, I used to say I want to look like The Rock. And in fact, I have a standee in my basement where I call the pain cave of Dwayne The Rock Johnson standing there looking at me saying, get to work. And
that's motivation in itself.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, for sure, right? In fact, a lot of those GLP-1 agonist drugs, they will, the weight loss is up to 60% lean tissue. Right? So you can become a higher body fat percentage at the end of using Ozempic type medications and make yourself worse off than you were. So your body fat, you might be lighter, but your body fat percentage is higher. So the percent of your body weight that is body fat becomes higher by default because you've lost more muscle than you lost body fat.
And I'm like I said, I'm coming guns blazing today. How did your sense of identity evolve throughout the transformation?
I still struggle with it. There's this imposter syndrome thing that people have talked about, right? Yeah, sometimes it was interesting. I think I told you about this. I'd walk by my reflection in a window, and it would take me aback. I wouldn't recognize who that was. Whatever he said, my job was to execute the plan. At the end there, I was doing, 2.5 hours of cardio a day, and then and lifting for an hour a day. And then we did drop the calories at the end, but that was mentally tough. After 5 years, you build a muscle that, yes, it's painful. Yes, it's terrible, but it's temporary. And at the end of the day, the spoils are worth the suffering. And I think as Americans, or Westerners of all kinds, I think, we've been basically sold a system of eating food that is based on marketing and based on profit rather than based on health, right? And I think that we need to kind of take a look at taking ownership of your own life and start with the things that you can control, which is the things that go into your mouth and the way you move your body. And I think if you take care of that, you can start to do the inner work that you need to do to become the best version of yourself. And welcome to the Apex Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Bob GDMD. I'm here as always with my co-host,
Dennis V. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing great, man. We had a really cool last weekend. We were at Barnes & Noble, right?
That was a lot of fun, man. We got some new people holding the book, Becoming Undeniable.
Yeah, available on shelves all over the world, actually.
Absolutely.
And available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com, and I think it was at 32 other platforms across the globe. I even saw it at Target now.
That's great. That's great.
Isn't that cool?
We're going to have a lot of different events. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do today is I want to dive into the book with you a little bit.
Oh, no, okay, yeah.
Let's dive into the book.
Yeah.
And, we co-authored the book. It was a great process, but I want to turn this on you and kind of go back and let's dig in for the viewers and see what kind of went through the process. Yeah. What inspired you to write Becoming Undeniable?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's a motivational self-help book. It's kind of a dossier, so to speak, of my journey, and we kind of rehashed it all. You and I embarked on a challenge in December. I guess it was January of 24, but we talked about it in 23. I challenged everybody to a transformation challenge at the office, and that was kind of the pilot to this whole thing. And then you and I got to talking about it through that process of that transformation, that I wanted to kind of document what I went through in order to kind of get us to the point where I was going to be hosting a challenge myself.
Yeah, you inspired many people, 20 people in the office, collectively 200 pounds.
Yeah.
In an 8-week challenge, which is unbelievable to get that many people to buy in.
Yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun, right? What was your favorite part of that challenge?
For myself, working with my wife, we challenged each other. We held each other accountable. And, sometimes when you're going through something like this and you're doing I think it's that much more difficult if you're on your own. But if you have somebody to help you be accountable and push you, I think it makes a really big difference.
Yeah, it does. I didn't really have people in my home doing it with me, but I found a group or my tribe, so to speak, online in this online group that formed to do these transformation challenges, they kind of rallied around me like no one had ever experienced before. And that was that support and checking in online with that fitness family made all the difference.
But that says a lot about you, because there was a point you challenged us to 75 hard. We had a mini 21 hard challenge. And to know that, I mean, to have somebody kind of giving you a boot every day and say, hey, let's go do this together. And knowing not only you did 75 hard on your own, but 4 to 5 years, you're doing this over 200-pound transformation solo.
Yeah.
That says a lot about your grit, your toughness, your resilience, and just everything that you did. So thinking about this now, how did the process of losing all of this weight change not just the body, but also the mind and spirit of you?
Wow. That's a question. That's the whole book, really. But,
absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, it was a complete transformation inside and out. And it started, it took about 5 years to get to, and let's talk about the transformation a little bit. So there was a total of, and I just put the cherry on top back in April of this year, and that kind of ended the whole process, or kind of, hallmark, just kind of highlighted the end. And in the end, what I was able to do is lose 270 pounds of fat, but I also put on, well north of 40 pounds of muscle in that process over those 5 years. So it was a transformation. So it was a net loss of, just over 200 pounds. But the way that my body carries that 200 pounds, that 200-pound plus weight loss is very, very different than someone who went on Ozempic or had gastric bypass, because I didn't have either of those. And it transformed everything, just the way my body moves in space, everything, and the way it looks, the way I didn't want to look like Jared from Subway. Those before and afters where Jared, ate all these Subway sandwiches and he just looked like a smaller version of a fat guy at the end, and with no real muscle definition. And my goal was to actually end up coming out looking like, I used to say I want to look like The Rock. And in fact, I have a standee in my basement where I call the pain cave of Dwayne The Rock Johnson standing there looking at me saying, get to work. And
that's motivation in itself.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, for sure. Right. You didn't want to do that one set and you look over at Dwayne and he's like, come on, man, get it done. Right. But yeah, it was the outward representation of what happened on the inside. And there's a lot of inner work, a lot of inner child work that I did, some shadow work that I did to kind of get rid of some of the demons that plagued me. And at the end of the day, gaining, I think we talk about in the book, gaining a significant amount of weight over a very long period of time, you're just basically chasing a dopamine hit. And you're using, food and a sedentary lifestyle to mask symptoms that you were.
Well, pretty safe to say you were unhappy, in that state, and you just made a tremendous, all the effort you put in. And you say 5 years. I mean, when the weight comes on, that's 5 years of a lot of work to peel that away. And not only peel, like you say, to peel the weight away through a drug or through a surgery, you're peeling it away and you're also putting on muscle. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So people think there's this weird misconception that you can change fat into muscle and your muscle can turn into fat. That doesn't actually happen. What happens is you have multiple compartments. You have muscle tissue and you have body fat. And body fat is a store of fuel, right, that you didn't use. So your body says, what do I do with all this extra fuel that I didn't use? And it transforms it into triglycerides and packs it away as body fat. So you can lose weight, quote unquote, which is basically just a number on the scale, and it represents every bit of weight on your body, whether it be, fluid, body fat, muscle, bone, all the different fluids in your body, interstitial fluids, all these things. And you can lose weight. And that happens when someone takes Ozempic because they lower the caloric intake, right? Lower than what their body needs to function, and they'll lose weight. But they indiscriminately lose weight. So they'll lose weight, both muscle tissue and body fat. In fact, a lot of those GLP-1 agonist drugs, they will, the weight loss is up to 60% lean tissue, right? So you can become a higher body fat percentage at the end of using Ozempic type medications and make yourself worse off than you were. So your body fat, you might be lighter, but your body fat percentage is higher. So the percent of your body weight that is body fat becomes higher by default because you've lost more muscle than you lost body fat. So the whole idea that I, went into this is said, okay, how do I actually build muscle and lose fat at the same time? And it come to find out you can do it for someone who is deconditioned and has a lot of weight to lose can do it for a short period of time. But then your body gets really smart on how to not lose any more weight. So, and then you end up having to lose weight, which is both muscle and body fat. So what I found out, and I did a lot of research, I went down the rabbit hole. You diet or cut your calories for only a small period of time, 8 to 12 weeks at a time. If you're going to do a bodybuilding show, a bodybuilding prep, classically that's 16 weeks. So that's a little bit, and that's not necessarily a healthy thing. That's just something that someone does because they're a competitor and they're going to compete at the higher levels of a sport. So you do something that's not necessarily healthy. But to healthily lose a big amount of weight, you have to probably not do a calorie deficit for any longer than 8 to 12 weeks without coming back into a maintenance mode for another 8 to 12 weeks, right? So what I did was I would do a calorie deficit for 8 to 12 weeks, and then I would reverse diet and bring my calories back up and maintain that weight loss within 5 pounds of what I lost. So when I would reverse diet, I'd bring back my calories until I started to gain a little bit of weight, pound or two, and then I would slowly bring the calories back down so I would maintain that same weight loss. And I'd keep it myself there. And then my goal changed to performance rather than weight loss. So I would work on lifting heavier, running longer, doing more cardio, fueling the activity that I was doing with my food to maintain that muscle that I spared as I lost the fat, and maybe even put a little bit of muscle on during that period of time. So when you gain weight, the double-edged sword is you're going to gain muscle and fat too, right? At the same time. But the whole idea is to gain a little bit more muscle than you do fat. And then you rinse and repeat and do the cycle again. So 8 to 12 week, calorie deficit, 8 to 12 week maintenance, 8 to 12 week calorie deficit, 8 to 12 week maintenance. That's why it takes so long to do a body transformation rather than just losing weight. Because I can tell you, I did a 16-week prep, and in the last 4 weeks, I dropped 20 pounds, right before I stepped on stage. And I can tell you 8 weeks post, I'm about that same 20 pounds back that I lost at the 4 weeks. So, and I'm in maintenance mode now and building and looking at performance metrics rather than weight loss metrics at this point.
And I'm sure there were many along the way. What's the largest barrier that stood out to you throughout this whole process that you may have talked about in the book?
That's a loaded question, Dennis, actually.
Yeah. I came out guns blazing today.
You did, man. The thing is, the story inside and out. You could tell it for me, so you know which questions to ask. So, yeah, I mean, I may have answered in the book, but I think I have a different answer now. I think my mental state was the biggest obstacle, and building that internal grit, that mental toughness that it took. And 75 Hard was the stone in which I sharpened the blade on.
Well, I can even see, when you talk about mental grit, I could even see, after you did this transformation is when we really started diving in and doing a lot of this. But I saw your mental grit really sharpening up a lot as you went through stepping on stage and everything, because that was from August to April. That was quite a...
Yeah, I did a 9-month prep actually for that. And then I did the class. So I did 9 months of prepping, but it was the first few months of that was basically just getting really good at hypertrophy training, putting muscle on, getting stronger, more intense training like a real bodybuilder, like a professional bodybuilder, to put on some muscle before I started the descent. And then what we did is we didn't really cut the calories that much until the very end. He's like, my coach was saying it's like taking in a big Boeing 747. You crash, you go down too fast, you'll crash. So you have to kind of take it down nice and slow. And so what we did is we increased the intensity and duration of the workouts. That's how we created the deficit rather than dropping the calories. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and I just followed whatever my coach said. I just did it. And I didn't ask questions. Whatever he said, my job was to execute the plan. At the end there, I was doing, 2.5 hours of cardio a day, and then, and lifting for an hour a day. And then we did drop the calories at the end, but that was mentally tough. After 5 years, you build a muscle that, yes, it's painful. Yes, it's terrible, but it's temporary. And at the end of the day, the spoils are worth the suffering,
And I'm like I said, I'm coming guns blazing today. How did your sense of identity evolve throughout the transformation?
I still struggle with it. There's this imposter syndrome thing that people have talked about, right? Yeah, sometimes it was interesting. I think I told you about this. I'd walk by my reflection in a window, and it would take me aback. I wouldn't recognize who that was. And a lot of times I'm still in the mindset of someone who is 450 pounds. Sometimes I still look twice before I sit in a chair to see if it will hold me. And I'm at 220 right now, right? And in a fairly lean 220. I'm not, overweight by any stretch, but
if you could pop the camera on my
yeah.
side, this is the before and after of all the work Bob has done, which is just tremendous. And that, like I said, no surgery, no GLPs. This is hard work. And hats off to you, man.
Yeah, thanks.
So is there the book is so inspirational. There's so many inspiring moments in the book. And there's several people that we know that have read the book, have talked to us about the book and everything. Is there a moment you're hearing from people that really inspired them? Or something to you that you say that you find to be one of the most inspirational moments in the book?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. Usually I get people just saying it was really inspirational, and seeing that someone who's a regular person can just go and do it is really all that it takes. Then it's funny. I'll get people who say, oh yeah, I couldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, you could. You just don't want to, anybody can. It's just getting a little bit of, a little education and a little bit of determination. It's simple, actually. It's one of my favorite sayings is it's simple. It's just not easy. Right.
It's funny. I mean, I went through a 70-pound transformation, and I remember prior to the day where you challenged everybody in the office, I was thinking I really had to make a change, because I saw some pictures. My daughter graduated from college. I saw some pictures, and there was the easy way out. And I just didn't really know what to do. And I said, I got to get in his mind. I have to, because like I said, this didn't happen by accident, and it's a great process, and you start to really feel good about yourself, and you are inspiring people. Now, how do you address issues of body image and self-love?
You're just slinging them, man. Yeah, body image. One of the things that I did, I was talking earlier about the dopamine hit and using for dopamine. A lot of people use their phone for dopamine hit, right? And doom scrolling. Some people will use, alcohol, drugs, or any other, variety of vice to satisfy that dopamine hit. One of the things that I did was I invested in well-fitted clothes. Every time I hit a new benchmark, I would hit, I'd say, okay, I have a tailor. I'm fortunate enough to be able to have a tailor to make suits and clothes for me, and I would have something made and have it fit right. And there's something to be said about wearing clothes that fit properly. But I can still remember the first time I bought an athletic fit top shirt and I put it on. I felt so uncomfortable in that, not because it was an uncomfortable fabric or an uncomfortable feeling, just the fact that I was now putting on something. I would always wear very baggy clothes to try to hide, being grossly obese. But the fact of the matter is, you still put that frock on, people are still going to tell, right? But the first time I ever put that on, and I felt so uncomfortable. And then I looked in the mirror. I was like, I didn't even recognize myself, right? Good fitting clothes makes a huge difference. And you have to keep looking at yourself, keep looking at yourself, and take a lot of pictures and compare the pictures from before and after, right? And then you reprogram that subconscious mind to say, yeah, I can do this. There was a point where, I had won that body shred challenge, and it was out at First Form, and they have a Porsche out in the way. You've seen the Porsche, actually, right? You saw the actual one that I'm talking about.
Yeah. What's interesting, if you were to ask me that question, I thought you were going to turn it on me. That's one of the most inspirational things in the book.
Yeah. So
this is a great story.
Yeah. So I was there at First Form, and I told a story in the body shred community about me buying my dream car because I could then fit in it. And the person who hosted it, she's a rock star. She plays for Alice Cooper, and she was there to present me with the prize, the award. And we were there, and she looked at me. She said, I heard you're a car guy. And I said, yeah. She goes, why don't you get in? And I said, there was something about starting the car. I said, I bet you I could start it. And they said, there's like 17 steps to do it or whatever. And if you could do it, you could drive it. I said, I would do it, but I can't, I'm not going to be able to fit in that thing, because you have to, scoot yourself through the window and fit in this like very fitted little race car seat. And Nita chided me to get in. She's like, no, you're getting in. I said, no, I can't get in there. This went on for maybe about 5 minutes, back and forth. She's like, you're going and getting in there. And she grabbed the water out of my hand, grabbed my phone. She goes, get in there, and I'm like, I can't, there's no way I'm going to fit in there. She goes, no, you are going to fit in there. Go and do it. And after about 5 minutes, sure enough, I get over there, and you have to hoist yourself up kind of on the the roof of it, and go feet first in, slide in, and maneuver yourself in there. And I was able to do it, and it fit great. And then to kind of put a cherry on top of that moment, she asked me to unlock my phone and she snapped a picture of me in there. So that was kind of that was a day where my body dysmorphia kind of was kicking in full force, and luckily I was encouraged, so to speak, to get in there, and it was kind of a little bit of a triumphant moment for myself.
Absolutely. We're not just not Nita, anybody. Alice Cooper's guitarist and Demi Lovato's guitarist, and she set up a challenge where you won an unbelievable guitar, and which was a nice carrot.
Yeah, for sure.
As what you were doing. What is the importance that patience and persistence plays in achieving long-term health and wellness goals?
Yeah. So anyone who knows me well knows that patience is something that I work on, especially patience with myself. Yeah. The thing is, you have to go and do this thing with blind faith that what you're doing is working. Because day to day, you do not see, you go to the gym one day, you diet one day, you see nothing. You go 2 days, you see nothing. You go a week, you see nothing. So you keep doing this thing that's somewhat unpleasant. To be in a calorie deficit is somewhat unpleasant, right? You get hunger pains, you get tired, you get dizzy, you get irritable because you're not getting the same amount of caloric intake. Your brain isn't used to functioning on less fuel. In comes about week 3. You start to notice a little bit of difference. Your clothes are fitting a little bit looser, right? You have a little bit more pep in your step. Someone says, "Hey, are you losing weight?" Right? And then there's a funny thing that happens as you go down this path too, and I'll go into that. But you just have to have faith that the science is right and that the people who've done it before you and who are advising you of what to do, that they know what they're doing. And yet just have to have blind faith. And at the end of the day, I was thinking to myself, as I was going through this, it would get frustrating because you'd be working and working. You'd see no change on the scale, no change in the mirror. And then all of a sudden week, 2 or 3 comes and there's a whoosh, you lose 5 pounds. All at once. Your body wants to hold on to a lot of stuff. You get a lot of inflammation, water retention. It's a lot that goes into a number on a scale, right? But understanding that others have walked that way and they've had results and success, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just follow what they do and follow what your coaches say and it'll happen. But it's not something that happens overnight. So you have to be able to trade short-term discomfort for long-term gain.
That's great advice.
And just really understand that it's going to happen and have faith that it'll happen. And then fast forward to a year later, someone you haven't seen in a year and you've lost a significant amount of weight now. Like in my profession, I'm a dentist. I see everyone every 6 months or so. There's times where people will go 2 years without going to the dentist, believe it or not. Right? This is a thing. And a lot of times people would say, "Is he sick?" Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah.
Like they wouldn't say, "Oh, wow, look at him. He's doing a great job." Their first thought is he's sick, right? Then you get way down the path, right? And everything about me has changed. I have no hair now. I changed the way my hairstyle. I was very thin up top, and I just during the pandemic decided to embrace the chrome. And it was one of the best things I ever did, actually. I put on some facial hair, just to kind of have a new look. I've changed the way that I dress. All these things have changed. I look like a completely different person. So when I walk into a room and I haven't seen someone in 4 or 5 years, they don't even know. They'll ask if I'm me. To the staff. They'll say,
"That's funny."
They won't even, they're like, "What happened to Dr. Gauthier?" And they're like, "That's him." They're like, "No, it's not. That's not him." Right. Because I look completely different, like not even the same person. But again, you'll get different results, different comments from other people, many people. I've had people say I look terrible now, which is kind of an interesting thing too. They're like, "He looks terrible. He looks sick." How do I look sick? I don't know.
You're healthy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, healthy. How has sharing this story impacted your perspective on resilience and human?
That's a thoughtful question. I don't know that I have an answer right at the tip of my tongue.
That's okay.
How does it shape? Well, it makes me certainly believe more in my own abilities, right? It makes me feel like there's no challenge that I can probably not get through, and it gives me a sense of strength and power that I didn't probably have. Gives me a sense of calm too, because there's a lot less anxiety about what's going to happen in the world, because I think I can show up in a much stronger way. That's, more resistant way. Right. And then it actually helps me show up for others in a way that I couldn't have shown up before. And it also tells me that I think that resilience is probably built. I don't think you're born with resilience, so to speak. I think you need to be tried, right? You need to work that resilience muscle, that mental toughness muscle. And you need to be presented with obstacles in order to build that. We talk about that on the show a lot, actually. Now that I'm actually working through this question as we speak, we talk about overcoming obstacles to get to your apex. We talk about that all the time. I think you need the obstacles in order to get to your apex. You need to do the reps. You need to be presented with stimulus that you have to overcome in order to grow. And if you don't have those stimuli, you cannot get there. So you need to have those obstacles. And if you follow Jocko Willink, right, he will talk about when he hits an obstacle, he always answers good. So I use that. He wrote a great book called Extreme Ownership. That book is awesome. He basically talks about everything that's happening in your world. If you take extreme ownership to it, basically, you have a team and the team failed. It's none of the team's fault. It's your fault as the leader, not leading them properly, not thinking of whatever had to happen. So you take ownership for all the parts, good and bad, in your life, right? And you're no longer a victim of any circumstance. The circumstance just is, and you have to overcome it, adapt and overcome it. If you have that mindset, I think most people in this life choose the easy path, right? But the success that they're after is hiding behind the work that they're afraid to do, because you cannot become the version of yourself without going through the work, without going through that crucible that hardens you, right? And I'm not talking about becoming a hard person that's not empathetic or any of that. I'm talking about being resistant to adversity. And the more you practice that and the more you do that, the bigger that muscle becomes. And then the more you can handle over time.
100%. And I just see you moving around this office. It's much different than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, and your day starts at 4 a.m. where you're already walking, you're already working out. You don't stop here. We do our stuff afterwards. You have that much more life in you.
Yeah. It's because I'm not carrying around an extra 270 pounds of fat, right? And I have a frame that's even more beefed up than it used to be. So I have a lot more resistance to adversity, so to speak.
What do you hope readers can take away from?
I'm hoping that it inspires people to make a change, because, health is wealth. And if you take someone like myself, the healthier I stay, the longer I stay, the more I can work and the more I can deliver the services that I deliver to people, the better I can make those people's lives, the better I can make the team around me's lives, the better I can make my own life, the more profitable I can be over the longer period of time. So putting the time and effort into becoming a healthy version of yourself pays more dividends than any other thing you could ever think of. And at the end of the day, you want to add life to your years rather than years to your life. You know what I mean? And I would much rather put more life into the years that I got than extend my life and be debilitated. And it's interesting that the more and more they look at these, the data, the biggest predictor of all cause mortality is the amount of muscle mass you have on your frame. And we had talked to Dr. Brett Osborne about this early on.
First couple months of the podcast.
Yeah. And he was talking about, he's a neurosurgeon, and he's talking about, people who have low percentage of muscle on their frame. When they fall and break a hip, they're kind of done for, right? That's the start of the end, right? But if someone has a large amount of muscle mass and they end up breaking a hip, they can come back. They're more resilient. Someone ends up with a cancer diagnosis and has to go through radiation, chemotherapy, all the treatments to treat that cancer. They're going to be more resilient because of the muscle mass, because, the wasting will be less, or they'll be more resistant to it. So I'm hoping that I can inspire people to live a richer life through the discipline of taking care of themselves. And I think as Americans, or Westerners of all kinds, I think, we've been basically sold a system of eating food that is based on marketing and based on profit rather than based on health. Right. And I think that we need to kind of take a look at taking ownership of your own life and start with the things that you can control, which is the things that go into your mouth and the way you move your body. And I think if you take care of that, you can start to do the inner work that you need to do to become the best version of yourself. And I can say that I will never, ever go back to the way that I used to live. Not at all.
Initially, when you started and you started losing some weight, were there times where you're like, pretty easy to go back?
Oh, yeah. Let's just talk about this. So I started another version. This will be my fourth version of 75 Hard. I started it, I guess, a little better than a week ago. And I got to day 7 and in the app, and I went to go and open it up, and I got the big frown from Andy Frisella saying, "You failed. Start over." Because on day 7, I missed a workout and wasn't able to get it done. There's nobody looking over my shoulder. It's self-accountability. It's the way I sharpen the blade. And I felt, at this point, during this point in my life, I needed to have a little bit of resharpening of the blade, some personal things going on and personal issues that needed to be taken care of. But I started to lose sight of some of the principles that I had, had adopted over the past 5 years. And the easiest way I know how to do that is to do a 75 hard. But I kept myself accountable, and you know what? I'm going to start it again on Monday when everything's clear and I can start Monday fresh, and I'm going to go again. And this time, I'll get through it. But do you know how many times I had to start 75 hard, or do you know how many times I had to restart my program? There's never a better time to restart than today. The only other better time to restart something is right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's the thing. Like, there is many times, many times that I wanted to quit, many times that I fell off. But when you look at the aggregate average, right, you do enough of the things well, you're going to end up with the result. And, when I'm now in maintenance and I've gotten to the point where I did a bodybuilding show, I got on the stage, it was a great success. I felt great. What are we, like 2.5 months out now from that? And I've been living in maintenance, and like my macros and all that, like I'm eating more than I had before. I'm at 3,000 calories a day. I have a cheat meal every week, once a week, and it's usually in a social setting where I can still be social and it's not so rigid. I think I can probably maintain this, this lifestyle forever, really, because I don't feel like I'm deprived in any way. But I can tell you that most people, when they hear what I do, they say, I can't do that. But yeah, you can. You just choose not to,
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, you knew that was coming. That's the dentist special, right? So yeah, one of the things that I think, if you read the book, you'll hear that I was in basically an 18-year marriage with the same person for 20 years. We had 2 wonderful kids that are, young adults now. One is off on his own. One is still almost launching. But one of the things, when I first met my now ex-wife, I was an oarsman for UMass, and I was a certified trainer, and I was a freshman varsity. I was actually varsity oarsman as a freshman. I was fit. I did amateur powerlifting. I did amateur bodybuilding. I just hated to diet at the time, but I was extremely fit. No one would ever think that I was an obese person or whatever. And then what happened was I just kind of stopped doing the things that kept me in that place once I met my then, she was my girlfriend, became my fiance, then my wife, and now my ex-wife. But what I did was I embraced the provider role when I became a dad, and I stopped doing the practices that I had done to keep myself in shape. And the thing that I would tell my younger self is, don't stop. Always carve out that hour for yourself every day to put your own mask on. And what I mean by that is, like, when you get on a plane and the cabin announcement is, in case of, cabin pressure loss, a mask will drop down, put your mask on first before you help others. So I got something, I actually said that today to a team member today. I'm like, I got to put my mask on. Right. And that basically meant I needed a minute to kind of catch my breath and think about, get my head right before I went into a particularly difficult case today. But I use that all the time. And I also talk about self-care. Right. So what I told my younger self, to make sure that you exercise self-care. And a lot of people talk about self-care as, going and getting their nails done and their hair done and getting massage. And yeah, that's self-care, right? But self-care I think of as, if you had a person who you were in charge of, how would you take care of that person so that they're healthy? That's self-care, right? So your parents were supposed to do that while you were little and you couldn't do that, but now you have to parent yourself, right? And that means you got to take yourself to the doctor. You got to take yourself to the gym. You got to take care of your nutritional needs and not just eat pizza and burgers and hot dogs and French fries and chips all day long and candy and whatever it is. You got to actually sit down and prepare actual real food that's not been modified and prepackaged for profit's sake, but actually eat real food in the right proportions and take care of yourself. Make sure you carve out that time to make sure that you're okay so that you can show up in the world in the best version of yourself.
I love that. So in the past year, Becoming Undeniable published, 2 other books published.
Actually, it's been 3. I saw the third one's been published too.
Third one's published.
Yeah.
So 3 children's books are published. Here's 2 of them. The other one's up. There's another one coming. Do you have anything else left in the tank? Are you done?
No, we got more coming.
Yeah, we do.
We have a lot more coming. There's another project that's finished that we can't really disclose at this point, but it's in the works. We have another one that's in production, as we say.
Yes, we do.
So more to come.
It's going to be a great year. I've enjoyed this thoroughly with you, and just Thank you for taking me along for this journey. It's been great, and seeing you change lives, man.
It's a partnership. You're right along with me, and thanks for coming, man, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. The synergy is just amazing.
Likewise.
Right. And we were talking about one thing I want to talk about, partnerships, right? And this is just for anybody who's interested in partnerships, whether it be, in a business situation or in a romantic situation. Having a good partnership is having the same end goal, but complementary, strengths.
Absolutely, because you and I come at two different angles, but we respect each other to do our part to get to that end goal.
Right.
Okay.
And you got to be aligned on the end goal. And, I got to be strong at things that you're not.
Absolutely.
And you're strong at things that I'm not. And that's what makes it work. So, Dennis.
It's go time.
It's go time, man.